Going to speak about the function and composition of the blood. Blood is one of the most important components of life. So to analyze or test the blood in the lab, we draw the blood from superficial veins. However, if we want to check the efficiency of the gas, we should take the blood from the arteries, not the veins. Once we take the blood is basically placed in a test tube, and then we could just analyze it. We know that there are four different types of tissues we have, and one of them is connective tissue. So blood belongs to the connective tissue. Since it belongs to the connective tissue, it means it has a large quantity of extracellular material. And that extracellular material, in the case of the blood, is a fluid that we call it plasma. So once we place the blood in the centrifuge will spin it and separate the blood into two parts. Approximately 55% is going to be plasma, and about 45% is going to be formed element. So I will separate into two portions: 55% plasma, 45% formed element. So the formed element includes the red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets, and the plasma includes water, proteins, and nutrients and electrolytes and so forth that we're going to look at. So here's the blood where we look at it. So approximately 46 to 63% of that blood is plasma, and approximately 37 to 52% is formed elements. Now, if you look at the male-female differences, females have 37 to 47% formed element. So that formed element in the case of female is going to be 37 to 47. In the case of male is going to be 42 to 52. So it ranges. So male have higher proportion of the red blood cells compared to the females, and that percentage of the red blood cells hematocrites. So this portion over here, because 99.9% of the red blood the formed elements are red blood cells, we could say that this percentage represents the percentage of red blood cells. Now, why male have too much? There are a number of reasons. One of the hormones that stimulate production of red blood cells is called androgen. So androgen is the hormone that stimulates production of red blood cells, and testosterone is from that family. So male have more testosterone, more of that red blood cells are stimulated to be produced. In addition to that, red blood cells are inversely or indirectly proportional to the fat proportion. So this means, like, if you have too much fat, you have fewer red blood cells. On the other hand, it's directly proportional with the muscle. So if you have too much muscle, you have too much red blood cells. So because male have proportionally more muscle, less body fat, that's why they have higher proportion of the red blood cells. In addition to that, when women periodically get menstruation cycles, so they lose the blood. The plasma portion of the blood basically includes the water, proteins, plasma proteins, nutrients, organic waste, and so forth. And the formed element portion includes the red blood cells, white blood cells, and another fragment of cells which is called platelets. So platelets are not actually cells. Platelets are fragments of a very large cell that's called megakaryocytes. So mega means big, karyo means nucleus, and cyte means cell. So basically it means a cell with huge nucleus explodes, and the fragment of that explosion will be platelets. Now, sometimes what you could get is you could get less amount of formed element. So the percentage of formed element in this case will be less than 37%. If it's less than 37%, we could consider that this individual has anemia, and the amount of red blood cell is less. Or you could have it more. In this case, we see proportion of the formed element is much higher than 52%. So we could say that this person has elevated percentage of red blood cells. Now we're going to put it in a chart. So we take this blood. So let's say that we take the blood, we spin this blood into the centrifuge. The blood separates into two portions. We take this portion, and this portion is going to become our plasma. And we take this portion, which is the formed element, and that's going to be our formed element. We said formed element is in average 45%, and plasma is in average 55% of the total blood. So now we're going to discuss what does the plasma consist of. So what are the different things that's in the plasma? Plasma is a complex mixture of water, proteins, nutrients, electrolytes, waste product, hormones, and gases that we're going to look at. Mainly plasma consists of water. Actually 92% of plasma is just water. In addition to water, about 7% of plasma is plasma proteins, and the other approximately 1% are nutrients such as glucose, lipids, vitamins, amino acids, fatty acids, glycerol, and so forth. And there's electrolytes, nitrogenous phase, and other substances. Now let's look at the proteins. Basically, there are hundreds of other substances that dissolved in the plasma that we're not going to discuss everything, but you should know it. Now, about 7% of the, we said 7% of the volume of plasma is plasma proteins. Those proteins include several plasma proteins that are very unique to plasma. And in addition to that one, there are additionally other regulatory proteins such as enzymes, hormones, and coenzymes, and those regulatory proteins are in a very small quantities. Now let's look at those unique proteins. So one of those unique proteins, albumin, and the second one is fibrinogen and globulin. So we're going to discuss those three proteins. So first, albumin. Albumin is 60% of the plasma protein, so it's very abundant. The most numerous protein is plasma protein is albumin. It's important in transporting substances. So albumin is binding protein. This means that they serve as a transport medium. They transport fatty acids. They transport steroid hormones. In addition to that one, they also play a major role in blood osmotic pressure. So to maintain that osmotic pressure, they play a role. The next protein is fibrinogen. It's a molecule that plays major role in blood clotting. Fibrinogen, on the other hand, is the least abundant, which means 4% of the plasma protein. So this one is 60, this one is only 4. It's the least numerous of the three plasma proteins. They are produced by the liver. Fibrinogen is essential for blood clotting. The next one is globulin. It serves two purposes. It basically acts as a transport. So it transports substances. For example, it transports iron, it transports lipids, it transports fat-soluble vitamins. And the second role that it plays, it's important in immunity, in body defense. For example, immunoglobulin, which is antibodies, are produced globulin proteins. Now, 96% of proteins are produced by the liver. So what is that telling you? That tells you that you could just look at the blood proportion and composition of the proteins, and that will tell you something about the function of the liver. In addition to those plasma proteins, there are many other regulatory proteins, and those proteins are enzymes, hormones, proenzymes, and other regulatory protein that are in a very small quantities. Now let's look at the nutrients. So we're going to discuss now the nutrients. What are the different types of nutrients that you find in the plasma? You find glucose, which is used as a source of energy. In addition to glucose, we find amino acids. In addition to amino acids, we find fatty acids. We find cholesterol, we find glycerol. All those nutrients, organic nutrients, are crucial. They're crucial for two reasons. Number one, that they're all used to produce ATP. they're used to produce energy for the body. And the second crucial role that they have to maintain growth and maintenance and repair of the cell. So anytime cell is damaged or injured and it has to repair itself, those amino acids will be used to make new proteins. Glucose is mainly used to make ATP. Fatty acids could be used, and also amino acids could be used to make hormones and so forth. So it's used for those purposes. So what does the plasma do? Plasma is basically transporting those nutrients from the intestine. When you eat from the intestine, those nutrients are transported to the liver, and then from the liver to the cells, and then the cells use those and produce waste product. Now let's look at the electrolytes. What are the electrolytes and their functions? There are many different types of electrolytes that you find in the plasma. Sodium is make up about 90% of plasma cation. So there's positive ions and 90% of that. In addition to sodium, you find potassium, calcium, magnesium, chlorine, bicarbonate, phosphate, sulfate. So you find all these different ions. What are their main functions? Those electrolytes are basically normal extracellular ions found in the plasma. They play a vital role in cellular activity. For example, sodium and potassium and calcium plays a major role in muscle contraction and cardiac contraction. Carbon dioxide is transported in the form of bicarbonate and so forth. So they're basically playing major role, and plasma contains, in addition to that one, plasma contains nitrogenous waste as byproduct of metabolism. We're going to discuss nitrogenous waste in a second. So what is the nitrogenous waste? The nitrogenous waste that we're going to discuss right over here includes urea, which is one of those products that you find in the plasma. It contains uric acid. Uric acid is basically formed during breakdown of nucleic acid. So when you break down nucleic acid, uric acid is formed. You have creatinine, which is produced in the body continuously by the muscles. So muscles constantly produce creatinine, and creatinine is basically one of the waste that has to be eliminated. So plasma delivers this product, this waste, to the kidneys for removal. Ammonium ions is another one of the other waste product that you could find in the plasma. Ammonia production occurs in all tissues during the metabolism of amino acid and other substances that contain nitrogen. You could find bilirubin. Bilirubin, when basically red blood cells are broken down, when they're old, after 120 days, when the red blood cells are broken down, one of the pigment that makes up that's part of the hemoglobin is called heme, and that heme is basically converted to biliverdin, and biliverdin is converted to bilirubin, and then bilirubin is excreted. So those are all the different organic waste, which is the byproduct of metabolism, and they're transported to the liver, so that the liver could either further break them down and excrete them, or they're transported to the kidney so the kidney could excrete them. What are the other substances? In addition to this one, there are enzymes, hormones, proenzymes, and dissolved gases such as oxygen and carbon dioxide that's found in the plasma. So this is, in a nutshell, this is all what you find in the plasma. So in the plasma, basically, those are all the substances that you find in the plasma. Now we're going to switch to discuss what are the formed elements. What do you find in the formed elements? So let's switch there. We're done with the plasma. Now we're going to look at the formed elements. So formed elements include red blood cells, white blood cells, which are called leukocytes. Red blood cells are also called erythrocytes, or platelets, which are the fragment of big cells that's called megakaryocytes, those are thrombocytes. So what are red blood cells? So we're going to discuss first red blood cells. So red blood cells over here are bioconcave shape, and this increases their surface to volume ratio. They have disc-like shape. They don't have nucleus in most of the organelles. So basically, if they don't have nucleus, that means they don't have DNA. If they don't have DNA, they cannot produce messenger RNA. If they don't have messenger RNA, why do you want to have rough endoplasmic reticulum and ribosome? Because rough endoplasmic reticulum and ribosome plays role in translation of the messenger RNA into the protein. If you don't have nucleus, you don't have DNA, you don't have messenger RNA, you don't need those organelles. And furthermore, because red blood cells transport gases, they don't have mitochondria, because mitochondria is one of the organelles that consumes oxygen, so you don't want to have mitochondria there. It will be the same exact way that you order pizza and the pizza delivery guy, in this case being the red blood cell, and the pizza itself being the oxygen. So the pizza delivery guy comes to your house and says like, I was supposed to deliver the pizza, I took the pizza, but by the time I got here, I finished them, I ate them all. And that will happen with the red blood cells. So red blood cells taking oxygen from the lungs, by the time it comes to the cell, if it had mitochondria would have consumed all that. So in order not to consume it, they don't have that organelle. 99.9% of form elements we said as red blood cells, and hematocrit, we said the percentage of the red blood cells, you basically in male, that's 42 to 52, we said, so 40 to 50, and female, it's 37 to 47. About 95% of the proteins that's found in the red blood cell as hemoglobin and erythropoietin is basically the process by which erythropoiesis is the process by which new red blood cells are formed, and what stimulates this process, a hormone called erythropoiesis stimulating hormone, or EPO. So EPO increases when the level of red blood cells drops. So low level of red blood cells means like you have more erythropoiesis and you produce more. Red blood cells pass through reticulocyte and erythroblastocyte stage. So basically, as they develop from a very from stem cell that's called hemocytoblast, they go through a number of stages and steps and phases. They transport oxygen, so the main function is to transport oxygen, and they pick up carbon dioxide from tissue and bring it to the lungs. So basically with this one, we're done briefly with the red blood cell. This is all about the red blood cell. Now, in our next video, I'm going to discuss in more details about the red blood cells, hemoglobins, their lifespan, and everything else. So at this point, that's enough for the composition. We're going to move to the platelets. Now let's discuss the platelets. What are the platelets? So they're actually, as I said earlier, not cells. They're fragments of a big cell called megakaryocytes. So mega means large, karyo means nucleus, and cyte, nucleus, the cell. So that means a cell with huge nucleus, and that cell with huge nucleus explodes, and that explosion creates tiny fragments, and those fragments are called platelets. Okay. When they're old or non-functional, they're removed by the spleen. Thrombocytopenia is basically low platelet contents when you have low platelet counts, or you could have high platelet counts. So it could be either low or high. Platelets basically secrete vasoconstrictors. What does it mean? It means like it reduces the blood vessels, constrict the blood vessels to reduce blood loss. So the functions of platelets are followings. They basically release chemical That's important in blood clotting. They temporarily patch damaged blood vessels, and they basically reduce the size of the blood vessel by constricting them, and that's basically we're done with the platelets. Now we're going to move to the next one, which is the white blood cells. So white blood cells are the least numerous of the blood cells. They're basically important in fight against pathogen and infection, and also clearing debris from the cell. And so they spend only a few hours in the bloodstream before they could migrate to the connective tissue. So one of their specific characteristics is that they're able to leave the bloodstream and enter the tissue, and they have amoeboid kind of movement, and they're attracted to chemical stimuli. And some of those white blood cells that we're going to discuss, there are different types of white blood cells. Some of those white blood cells have the ability to become phagocytic cells. For example, those cells include neutrophils, eosinophils, and monocytes. They could become phagocytic cells. The white blood cells are divided into two groups, and those two groups include granular and agranular. So granular simply means that the cells have tiny granules or tiny vesicles in their cytoplasm. And agranular simply means that those are the cells that they don't have any granules in their cytoplasm. So granular cells include three types of cells: neutrophils, basophils, and eosinophils. Neutrophils are 50 to 70%, so that's the most numerous type of white blood cells that you could see. Basophils are less than 1%, eosinophils are 2 to 4%. Agranular cells, the cells that don't have granules in their cytoplasm, are lymphocytes and monocytes. Lymphocytes are about 20 to 30% of the total white blood cells, and monocytes are 2 to 8%. Now let's look at the lymphocytes. Lymphocytes are further subdivided or differentiated into B cells, T cells, and natural killer cells. B cells are the one that will be producing antibodies. Now let's look at the neutrophils. So we're going to look at the neutrophils now. Neutrophils have multi-lobed nucleus. You see this, it seems as if it has one nucleus, two nucleus, and three nucleus. It seems as this cell has three nucleuses. And also, do you see this tiny dots over here? Those dots are granules. So this is granular cell, and this is the shape of the nucleus. So we have two characteristics to distinguish one of the 5 types of white blood cells. We look either, does it have granules? If it has granules, it's one of those 3 cells. If it doesn't have granules, it has to be one of those 2 cells. In addition to the granules, we're going to look at the shape of the nucleus. So in this case, what you see is, this seems as if it has more than one nuclei. The next cell is basophils. Basophils are less than 1% of the circulating white blood cells. They accumulate in the damaged tissue. They release histamine. So histamine is basically one of the chemicals that initiate inflammatory response. And they also release heparin. Heparin is anticoagulant like aspirin and makes your blood thin. And also, when you look at the cell, it has granules. So you see this tiny dots, even if it's dark purple, but you could see tiny dots in the cytoplasm. And basically, you see the nucleus is also looped. It has just fewer loops compared to the neutrophils. The next cell we're going to look at is eosinophils. This is 2 to 4%. They attack large parasites and worms. They play a role in controlling inflammatory response and play role in allergy and asthma. And again, if you look at the cytoplasm of the cell, you see tiny dots, and those dots are basically representative of granular cells. And when you look at the nucleus is kind of like a U-shaped nucleus. So it's like a letter U upside down, or it could be this way and so forth. So it's a U-shaped nucleus that it has. The next cell, monocytes. If you look at the monocytes over here, monocytes have a kidney-shaped nucleus. So this is the nucleus, looks more like a kidney. If you look at the cytoplasm, you don't see any granules. It has like kidney or U-shaped nucleus. They enter peripheral tissue and become macrophages. So those are the cells that will basically convert to macrophages, and macrophages are able to engulf large particles, infected cells, pathogens, and also clear damaged body cells and debris from the body. The next cell that we're going to look at is lymphocytes. When you look at the lymphocytes, it's a huge cell. It's larger than the red blood cells. And again, if you look at the cytoplasm, there are no granules, and it has a huge nucleus. 20 to 30% of circulating white blood cells is lymphocytes. Lymphocytes will divide into 3 different types of cells. They will divide into B cells. What are the B cells? B cells directly attack the infected cell. There are different types of, B cells differentiate into plasma B cells and memory B cells, and plasma B cells are the one that will produce antibodies. Memory B cells are there in case if you get the second infection, they will become activated. T cells divide into further T helper cell, T suppressor cell, and T cytotoxic cell. T helper cell and T suppressor cell are the 2 cells that regulate the immune response. So T helper cell stimulates the immune response, and T suppressor cell inhibits the immune response. Together, they control your immune response. And then you have T cytotoxic cell that directly attack foreign antigens, foreign cells, and infected cells. And then you have the third type, which is natural killer cell, and the natural killer cells basically detect infected cell and then release chemicals, and then those chemicals bind to the membrane of the infected cell and make a puncture in that and destroy the cell. And now let's summarize the whole presentation. So we basically said that the blood is basically divided of 2 parts. One part is the formed elements. The formed element, we said, is approximately 45%. And the formed element is made up of red blood cells, white blood cells, and fragment of cells that's called platelets. 99.9% of the formed element is red blood cells. White blood cells are further divided into 5 different types of cells. And we said the plasma portion of the blood, so here plasma portion, we said plasma portion is approximately 55% of the whole blood. And plasma includes basically mainly water, which is 92%, but in addition to water, it has also plasma proteins, nutrients, waste products, electrolytes, dissolved gases, and other regulatory substances. So in short, the blood function basically includes transportation. So when we say transportation of nutrients. So when we say nutrients, so basically food and nutrients from the intestine after the digestion and absorption, those nutrients from intestine are picked up by the circulation and transported to the liver, and then the liver distributes it to the cells. Gases, oxygen is transported, oxygen is picked up from lungs, delivered to the cells. Waste product, carbon dioxide is picked up from the cells and delivered back to the lungs. So it constantly picks up oxygen from the lungs, delivers it to the cells, and picks up carbon dioxide from the cells and delivers it to the lungs. It delivers hormones from the glands that they produce to the target organ and cells. It takes waste product, metabolic waste product from the cells to the kidneys and liver. The other function is protection. Protection is we said defense of the body, immunoglobulins and white blood cells. Different types of white blood cells basically attack different infected cells and parasites, and they're defending the body against any pathogens. And we said the third function is regulation. Regulation of what? Regulation of pH. Your body pH should be between 7.35 to 7.45. So it regulates it within that range. Temperature. We know that heat is produced by the muscular system, but it's distributed by blood and cardiovascular system. So cardiovascular system helps to distribute that heat. So with that, it maintains or regulates the temperature. It regulates the fluid balance. It regulates the electrolytes and so forth. And this concludes our presentation.